right, back on Play It Forward with Craig Hammill, filmmaker and founder of Secret Movie Club. Craig, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Costa.
My pleasure. You were nominated by David Cadillia, another fine filmmaker. And before we start talking about the cleats of imminent doom, is there anything that you'd like to share about yourself or your background or filmmaking in general?
I mean, I'm honored to be here. I love what we were talking about just before we filmed, which is this interview. Let's keep it on movies and the art. And I just say I'm a fourth generation Los Angelino. They exist. My great grandmother came here in 1901, and we got movies in our blood. My great grandfather was a tailor at MGM. He did the Tin Man's
Wow.
lining. Yeah, he did the
Wow.
Tin Man's lining in Wizard of Oz. And my grandmother used to tell me these memories of these movies like The Mortal Storm with Jimmy Stewart and Maureen O'Sullivan, where he'd be the tailor on it and he'd bring her onto the set when she was 7. So she has these memories of like Jimmy Stewart couldn't completely lift Maureen Sullivan. So they had grips with fishing wire that you couldn't see, and he'd do this and the grips would do that. And then Maureen O'Sullivan would raise. And my uncle made a movie in 1980 called Chasing Dreams. That was one of Kevin Costner's first movies. But it was a total indie back when everyone was just friends and family shooting on film. And, there was 3 channels still, and I was 3 years old. So the disease, the cinema disease passed on to another generation. I have it. And I've, been in movies one way or another since I was a kid.
Wow, Craig, cool. Well, today we're going to talk about the Cleats of Imminent Doom, and it was a film that you made a little while ago, but it's a very cute, very sweet, and really compelling movie about parents and children and the relationships and the expectations the parents have and the rebellion that children often have because of it. And it's packaged as a cute little comedy. So to dig back in your history, where did the germinal seed, the emotionally, that idea live in you to make that movie? What
Yeah,
inspired that?
yeah, it's funny. I know you and I were talking about this briefly. Dave Cadillia is an incredibly talented filmmaker, and he's helped me tremendously. He actually and his brother James worked on Cleats, and I was honored when you guys reached out. Uh, for whatever it's worth, I've made other things since then, but this is a good one to talk about. Actually, I'm glad I made it when I was going to graduate film school, and I wanted to shoot on film. It was shot on 35. And that was my thesis short. So that was 20 years ago. I'm going to out myself. I'm 45 now. I'm a father of 3 and all that stuff. But
Congrats.
yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, that's the thing I'm proudest of. My wife, my kids, and my family. But to answer your question, the germinal seeds were 2 things. One, I'm one of 7. And I have 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And my youngest brother is 8.5 years younger than I am. So he was the athlete of, we were the younger part of that group. And it was my brother, sister, and I, we kind of grew up together in the house. And he was in soccer. He was in 𝘊𝘭𝘬𝘮 soccer. And one day a parent said, "Oh, you're a filmmaker." And if he was like 8, I was 16 or something. And they put a camera in my hand. They said, "Could you shoot the game?" And I started to shoot this 𝘊𝘭𝘮 soccer game. But what was funny to me is I noticed a lot of the parents weren't paying any attention to the game. They were sort of gossiping, or they were doing business calls. And, you have that filmmaker brain where you're like, this is sort of interesting. So I started to film the parents in the foreground and the kids playing in the background, and the parents, and not thinking about what I was doing. I just thought that these are sort of funny things. And I made this, edited in camera, this thing. And then I handed it back to the parent. And I realized the moment I handed it back, I was like, they're going to see what I did. But I had this idea where I was like, that is kind of an idea for a movie, which is that I wanted to make a movie about middle-class suburban families. And it's sort of microcosmically fun to do that through the scope of sports, because a lot of people sign their kids up for t-ball or 𝘊𝘭𝘮 soccer, and you have all these different kinds of parents. And I was an assistant coach too for my little brother, and we would have parents that got way too into it. And I remember I was like, something's going on with that dad, because like the dad was screaming like he was an NBA coach. And I was looking at these 7-year-olds. I was like, this win or lose does not matter at all in any scheme of thing. But this dad was vicariously, something was going on. So anyway, cut to, I'm in film school and I doodle. Like I storyboard all my movies. I'm not talented, but I like to doodle and I like to draw. And when I was in classes where I zoned out, these characters started to come to me. It was very weird. It's actually one of the only times this ever happened to me. But the goalie in the movie Summer, I started drawing this little girl with a black eye, and I was like, oh, and it all came to me. It was really weird. Within a day, I was like, oh, Cleats of Imminent Doom. And then I drew this really aggressive girl, Abby, and I knew her dad must be the dad that was going to be the aggressive dad. And so you can see it in the movie too. The style of the movie is pretty broad and kind of cartoony in a way, and how the characters are drawn. And then I drew this little girl who was very much based on a little bit of me, because I was never athletically inclined. I was usually the bench warmer. And I always sort of observed people. And so she became our narrator, and she's the little girl who narrates the whole movie. And then I knew, oh, she doesn't have parents. So it's all weird. So those two things sort of combined like two storm fronts. And then I was like, this is the movie I'm going to make for my graduate thesis. And it was weird. I didn't even question it, because I love all kinds of movies and I love all kinds of tones. But weirdly, that broad, comedic, bold color tone, that was the tone of that movie, and I just went with it.
Yeah. Often like the answers to any question, they're so layered. So, you've got this inspiration for this particular film, and you get this kind of epiphanies of all these characters. And then there's like, why? Like, what was going on in your life, and it's just interesting to reflect on, because the movie at face value, it's a very, comedic kind of lighthearted thing, but it really deals with some, quite significant subject matter that, is across, race, across economic circumstances. And, now you as a parent, especially of 3, I mean, you clearly have faced that from both ends. Maybe when you were making the movie, you were kind of being more in the child role where you were doing it. And now you're more in the parent role. So now looking at the movie, and I don't know when the last time you did, but what do you think the message of the movie is?
You brought up a really good point, and I would tell other filmmakers, this isn't advice. I am, in fact, it's weird what's happening to me. I think you read happening to everybody. The older I get, the more I realize I don't know anything. I don't want to moralize to people. I don't judge folks at all, because I'm not in their shoes. And what you said is really key. When I made the movie, I was in between having been a kid, but not yet being a parent, and being able to be a 20-year-old, because the movie takes a slightly satirical tone, especially with the parents, as you said. I mean, there's the opposite team, and there's the dad who was an Italian soccer superstar, and the mom was a model. And I absolutely believe, from like one of my favorite filmmakers is Jean Renoir. And I love Jean Renoir because he never judged. And he always knew that people had that famous line from Rules of the Game, people have their reasons for why they are. And that always felt like truth. But now that I'm a parent, to your point, I feel like I was harsh on the parents. In a way that I don't know that I could be as harsh now, because I am always struggling to like be present for my kids. And I've turned into like the dad who's a workaholic dad, and we'll show up late in events, and we'll like try to be there and not look at his phone. And so now I understand it from the other side. But it's weird, because if you lose that ability to be satirical or to have a little edge, then sometimes you lose something as well. So to answer your question, in terms of message, I think I'm Irish Catholic, so I've got the rambling disease.
You go.
And Russian Jew. It's funny. I'm Irish Catholic and Russian Jew. Mom's the Catholic, dad's the Jew. But the message for me, which really weirdly, I guess, thank God, the message would still be the same if I made it today. I haven't grown out of the message, which was, I felt in the movie, although I don't really believe in a moralizing didactic message, I still thought, you know, the main thing here is you got to enjoy your time with the people you love while you have it. And, you know, you've got to really be present about that, because you never know when you're not going to have that time anymore. And so yelling at a soccer game, or forcing your daughter to, you know, make the goal kick, or taking a call because you're a lawyer, or not paying attention and gossiping with other parents or whatever. I get it. I mean, we're all only human, but how many years are you going to have where your little girl or your little boy is 10 years old or 11 years old, and they can see you on the sidelines just giving them the attention they need? So I think that and, you know, the little girl, Jenny, who's the narrator, you learn at the end of the movie that she lives with her grandparents. She says that in the movie. And then at the end, she sort of walks home on her own. You get the idea, oh, she's a latchkey kid. The grandparents didn't even come. And, you know, thankfully, you do see at the very end of the movie that the grandparents are there. And if you make it all the way through the credits, we did these little credit bumps. But there was also meant to be, I really love, and I think it's hard. And I think in the movie, you can see I don't really stick the landing. I mean, I can be critical of the movie 20 years later. The tonal things, some of the tonal things in the movie don't work. Like there's some PG-13, almost R-rated jokes later in the movie that are a little tonally off from others. And then also, but what I'm trying to get at is, I do love a movie where you're laughing, but then suddenly there's a bittersweetness. And then suddenly there's a moment. I like those colors. I like, oh, I was here and now I'm here, because that's life. And so I did want the movie to have a bittersweetness at the end, that all this stuff everyone was obsessing over. Here's this little girl who doesn't even have a mom or a dad, and nobody came to the game, and she's walking home. And you know, all these other kids at least had parents and they were there. And so I wanted a movie that, without being proselytizing or speechifying or whatever, or, you know, sermon like, maybe made you feel like, I got to enjoy the time I have with the people I love. Maybe sort of think about that.
Thanks, David. I think you did a good job of that. Oh, David, sorry. Thank you, Craig. I think you did a good job of that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's you know, it shows that was, you know, something that was important, and that the expectations and the frustration that can take part, consume so much of the daily life, is really not the focus. And there's a shift in perspective that the narrator helps the viewer see. And that's partly, like you said, because she doesn't even have any parents. So, and in the end, you know, the people are really, both sides, parents and children, are both want to come together and spend time together. And
Yeah, that was
so
important too, was, I think, specifically for that movie. I mean, some movies you need a foil or an antagonist, and I believe in drama and the fundamentals of drama. But I also like movies where, like, everybody's understandable, and that was important to me. Was in this movie, there really were no bad guys. It was just, in this movie, it was that shift of perspective. That was the important thing.
Greg, since you made this movie, how have you been changed? And I know it was a while back, but how do you think the making of this movie changed you as a person?
You know, I was thinking about this. I was actually glad, ultimately, that this is the movie we picked, because, for whatever it's worth, like, this is 20 years on. So there's a sort of an interesting, maybe, distance and perspective. And it's, you know, what was interesting about that film was, and I want to say, I know, I really loved what you said at the head. So, like, so I want to say this in a way that's just part of the narrative of being a filmmaker. So, that film, you know, I went to film school. I did show it. It actually got me a manager. I had a script, a feature script. But what was interesting was, I don't really know ultimately in the end how close I got to making a feature at that time. But I did that thing where I met with people. It looked like maybe I was going to get my feature film made, and it all fell apart in the 11th hour. It was really a horrible It's kind of a heartbreaking experience, because it looked like the financing was there. I felt at 26, 27, I was like, here we go. I'm on my way. And then it all fell apart. And the funny thing was, I'm a spiritual guy. I think I read a lot, and the thing that I appreciate, and what I'd recommend to people is read as many novels as you can, because when you read good ones, don't read trash, but read really good books, like see really good movies, because when you read the great ones, you get a bigger sense of the world and experience, because it's not your experience, and you notice themes that happen in these books all the time, the great works. And one of the themes you see all the time is, it's not going to be an easy road. Like, things are going to happen you don't expect, and it's going to be rough. And how you get through that, that's what life is. It's not success all the time, and champagne and unicorns and success stories and, holding up your award. That's not what life is. Even if that is part of life, you can almost count on there will be an equal amount of tragedy and crisis and heartbreak. So when the movie fell apart, I was really bummed, but weirdly knew that was part of it. I was like, well, I chose an occupation and a career where all you hear are horrible, even from the greats. Even Martin Scorsese tells you these stories where Last Temptation of Christ fell through, and I was thinking about quitting. And you're like, and that's Martin Scorsese. Like, I was thinking of quitting the business after Raging Bull or King of Comedy, and you're like, what? So if he's thinking that, everybody else is thinking that. And so the nice thing was, I never wanted to give up making a movie. That didn't. I wasn't like, I'm going into law. F it. I'm going to be a stockbroker, whatever. That never happened. But I was like, oh, okay, it's not going to happen quick and easy for me. And so I kept trying to make features. I couch surfed for a year. I mean, I maybe one day I'll put this all into a doc, or a movie. But I was really embarrassed. I had to swallow my pride. I was like, I got to work here. I ended up tutoring for years, because I was a tutor, and it paid the bills. And then weirdly, I founded this company called Secret Movie Club when I was 35, I think, because all my friends who had made movies said, if you really want to keep doing this, you need to understand distribution, exhibition, building an audience, advertising. Making a movie is just 49% of the game. I've told this story 1,000 times, but 51% of the game is what happens after you make the movie. And so I had done this thing when I was in film school where I would show movies and bring people to speak. It was great. Like, I had Robert Wise, right before he passed away, come talk about West Side Story and editing Citizen Kane. It was crazy. And I was like, a little voice in me. And I would tell people this: there's like a big voice you have, and then there's a quiet voice. And I would say, listen to the quiet voice and build up the patience and the self-control to not give in to impulse and be like, because the quiet voice said, why don't you try that thing you did in college? And it was quiet. It wasn't a loud voice. It was a quiet voice. And I was like, oh, yeah. So I founded this thing called Secret Movie Club. I started showing one movie a month at midnight at a theater here in LA on film, because I love film. And then that became a movie a week. And then my son, my wife and I were expecting a son about a year into it. And I said, well, I was still tutoring, and I said, well, I got to make this thing work because I got a family now. And I went to 4 movies a week, and I learned about social media and advertising. I was like still emailing people and putting up flyers for these events. And then it took off enough that ultimately I could leave my tutoring job. But it was something I loved doing. I was showing movies I loved, bringing in people who were speaking, learning that side of the business, but never losing. I was still doing documentaries, still doing short films, still being a filmmaker. And in a weird way, I wanted that. I was like, I'm going to make this thing I do, my day job. I'm going to make this bring me back I'm going to force myself to keep making. So I started doing an open mic short night, and I was like, I'll make shorts for that, and I'll make the commercials, and I'll shoot the docs. So suddenly I'm making, and I actually ended up shooting my first feature just last year at 44 years old. called The Afterworld Game. I shot it in August and September. And I did all those things I should have done in my 20s. Like I shot it on one location, which was the movie theater. Your audience can't see this, but I'm in my office in the movie theater, in the Secret Movie Club Theater. And I was like, I'm going to keep the budget low. It was 80 pages. I'm going to shoot it with what I have. I had an idea. I sort of reverse engineered it, but it was an idea I really believed in, that was kind of, the movie's about four people who each think they can get to the afterworld and back, and are sort of competing in this game to prove they can do it. Because I love adventure yarns and noirs from the 40s, and they're like special effects and wire work in it, but that's just, we shot it in 19 days. And anyway, so here you and I are talking in 2023, and I guess what I would tell the audience would be that, no, I could have never predicted that that would be the road. And I want to be very clear, because I think the only obligation we have as filmmakers is to I mean, look, I don't want to moralize, but so obviously this is me just speaking subjectively.
Go ahead and moralize.
Well,
don't worry about it.
Thanks, man. But for my own journey, I have my own belief system, obviously, but I think as a creative person, our one obligation is a search and for the truth and for being truthful. And as we've experienced it, because that's the value, is here's what I've experienced, and here's things that I've seen and observed, rather than putting up a movie that you know not to be true, or putting up things that happen in a movie that I think you can make an entertainment and still be honest. I think there are many filmmakers who can do that. So what I would say in my rambling thing is that I never would have chosen that path. Like if the universe had said, what path do you want? I easily would have said, I would want CLEATS of Imminent Doom to get me a manager. I would have wanted the script I had at 27 to have gotten made. I would have wanted it to blown up at Sundance or some film festival. I would have then wanted to have been making my second film at 28 and be doing this interview with 𝘊𝘰𝘰𝘮 with a 15 movie filmography, where, one of them's on BFI Sight and Sound 2022 best of all. Like, that's what I would have wanted. I wouldn't have wanted that I had to wait till I was 44 to make a feature, like lose everything in storage, totally fail at a film, couch surf for a year, do this thing that I didn't think would be. But the joy is now, having gone that path, I definitely learned things and realized things and kind of got beaten down and had to learn a humility and kind of try to get rid of a cockiness that I had that was younger. But I've not lost my love or passion or belief in cinema. And so that has actually maybe been the greatest gift the universe could have given me, was a path I never would have chosen. Because now I think, had I made a film at 27, I don't know if it would have been any good. I know the way that movie was coming, I don't know if I could have stood up to the people who were the money people. It may have been a total disaster, not the movie I wanted to make. Or worse, my head could have gotten really big. I never would have gotten married, had my kids, learned my lessons, and I'd be unbearable and obnoxious, which maybe I still am, who knows, but
more unbearable and obnoxious.
More unbearable, right. More obnoxious. And so now, weirdly, because I can say, and what I wanted to say about truth, I'm sorry, and this is where I'll end it, where I want to be honest with your audience, is I'm still struggling day to day. I run a movie theater, and every day I'm like, how am I going to keep this thing open? How are we going to bring in the revenues we need to be a functioning business? How am I going to finish my feature? I remember I shot my feature. I'm editing it now. Editing a feature is a whole other ballgame than a short. And I'm like slapping myself going, oh my, like, I don't need to put out a movie just to put out a movie. I want to put out a good movie. And then how am I going to do that? How am I going to do this? So the struggle continues. How am I going to be a good husband? How am I going to be a good father? But I will say, I get up every day and I enjoy it. Like, I enjoy all this stuff. And if I can say that, then you know what? F it. I'm a blessed person. Like, if I get up every day and I'm like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but this is kind of a fun puzzle and I like what I do. So anyway, that's a long answer.
That's beautiful, Craig. Thank you. It's a beautiful answer. One day at a time is how we all do it and get through it. And, it all happens for a reason. That's what I'm hearing. And we are made better for it if we can accept the circumstances that are there to offer us the guidance that we need.
That's how I that's how I feel. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you so much for being on the show. Craig Hammill, filmmaker, founder of Secret Movie Club. It was a pleasure. All right, everybody. Till next time.
Thank you.
Play it forward. My pleasure. All right, guys.